I truly believe that everything is downstream of money. Everything is downstream of money, so much so that when our money is broken, all of these issues start to really impact our lives. And we can see this taking place today. When our money no longer acts as a store of value, people are not simply going to not store value. They're going to try and find other ways to store value.
Sure.
And so they're going to funnel their capital, their purchasing power into other assets and use those as monetary goods.
Yes.
And what's interesting is, and there's a couple charts we can chuck up here.
Yeah.
So the first one is just kind of assets versus wages. So you can see here, there's 3 lines here. The bottom line is showing from 1980 to 2022, the growth in wages. The top line is showing the growth in the stock market, and the middle line is showing the growth in real estate. So what you're seeing is that wages are massively underperforming the stock market. They're massively underperforming real estate because people are simply funneling capital into assets to be able to use them as a store of value.
Right.
So what happens is, unfortunately, we create more and more wealth inequality as capital floods into asset prices. Those holding assets tend to see their net worth increase.
Right.
Those holding cash, the lower class, are struggling to get by. So we see huge increasing wealth inequality. And then the next chart is home prices versus wages.
Just on that last one real quick. I mean, you're visually showing here proof of the old adage, right? How the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It is maybe not entirely, but a large contributing factor is money printing, right?
Absolutely.
Where we are depreciating wages. And because the money's not storing purchasing power into the future successfully or adequately, that people then have to monetize other asset classes, right? Whether it be real estate or equities. So we have to, and that presumably contributes to homelessness as well, right? The fact that you're putting a monetary premium on housing where people are using it literally to hold value rather than to house people. I had a good friend of mine that lives in Orange County, wealthy guy. And there's one of the things you'll notice about many rich neighborhoods is a lot of the houses sit empty. A lot of them are owned by rich people as a means of storing value across time. And he hit me with this quote. He said, some of these houses are just spectacular. They have great views, et cetera. He goes, some of the best views in the world are wasted on the rich because these houses just sit empty. They're just savings accounts, basically, because the money is broken. So anyways, I just wanted to
I think that's a really good point. And actually, going back to that chart quickly, 1 second. Sorry. Going back to that chart, what you'll notice as well is on the left-hand side, we're looking at the annualized. So there's 3 dots on the left-hand side, and there's a line joining the 3 dots on the right-hand side. What that's actually showing is the annualized return on each of those, or the annualized growth in each of those asset classes from 1980 to 2022. And on the right-hand side, it's showing that annualized growth from 2010 to 2022. And what it's showing you is actually wages are slowly deteriorating while we're seeing an increase in that growth in real estate and equities.
Right.
And to your point, like where I live in Whistler, 61% of houses are empty. And it's because people aren't using them to live in. They're not using them to put a roof over their heads. They're using them simply as a store of value. And we're seeing it in London. There's something like 100,000 houses are empty in London. And the same thing with, say, farmland. People are, unfortunately, because there's some form of scarcity in land, people are buying up farmland left, right, and center. Now, these farms at one point were productive utilities for society. They're producing food that is feeding people. And now these individuals are not using them to farm. They're simply using them to store value. So they're taking a productive asset from society to store capital, which is actually impacting our productive capacity as a community.
Exactly.
Which is profound. And this is, again, going back to everything is downstream of money.
Yes.
When money no longer acts as a store of value, people aren't just going to simply stop storing value.
Sure.
They're going to try and store value in other things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the next slide, you can see here in Canada, we see this immensely. And it's the same in the States. But this is showing home prices in relation to income. And so income is basically, although obviously we're seeing a slight trend up, which I would argue is a result of obviously inflation, home prices just gone absolutely exponential. And this is also on top of that, we're seeing suppressed interest rates that are incentivizing debt consumption. And then the final chart,
this is why homes are unaffordable by current generation, right? Whereas in the past, you could really, with one income, right? Someone could afford to buy a home, support a family, et cetera. Again, going up Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a way was possible on one income. Now you can't even get a home. You can barely get one on 2 incomes today.
Absolutely. And the next chart perfectly kind of illustrates this, which is you're looking at millennial home ownership. So if you take the baby boomer population, when they were at the average age of 30, they owned something like 30% of the housing market.
Right.
You look at millennials today at the average age of 30, and they own about 4% of the housing market.
Wow.
Which just highlights that it's totally infeasible for the average person to be able to enter the housing market.
Right.
When you're looking at Canada, or okay, I would even say more specific, the Sea to Sky Highway, which is from Vancouver up to Whistler, where I live. Drive. It's an incredible drive. Yeah. And that area, the average house is around $2.5 million, while the average income is around $35,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
So you're looking at between 50 to 100 times the house price to wage ratio.
Wow.
Whereas when you're looking at the national average over the last 100 years, we're looking at like 6 times, 7 times, like far less. And so it's just become obscene because of our monetary intervention.
And this particular chart, I mean, there's little to no other causative factor other than the money printing that's driving this, right? Like this would not, there's no other explanation basically. It's like, this is how it's always been when we have a kind of a normal monetary standard, but when we engage in the money printing, all of a sudden the youth cannot get a toehold in the economic hierarchy, right? They can't get a home. It's hard to get ahead. And then you end up with, we've gone from, you said 30% to 4% home ownership among that age cohort. I mean, that's terrible, right? The nihilism that must come with this, right? If you're in your 30s and you've just found your identity, you're probably just getting started in your career, maybe you have a significant other and you're ready to start a family or at least start exploring that idea. Well, that's damn near impossible if you can't even own a home. And I think that gets back to what you're saying too, how it impacts not only the parent-child bond, but even the possibility of having a child in the first place if you can't get the home.